maybe like 5 to 10% of people that I work with actually has their diet really dialed in. Like people don't understand how important diet really is.
People will be very extreme with their diets or just not varied with their diets as well. So things like obviously the keto diet and things like that.
Injecting testosterone is not solving the testosterone problem because the testosterone is just a symptom. They don't know when to apply which protocol, specifically when it comes to sequencing. What do most men get completely wrong about the health and performance? And I'll go first on this one, and we can go back and forth on it. For me, it is people are taking way too many supplements for no specific reason.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, it's something that I've definitely been guilty of doing myself as well quite often. You know, it's very easy to get carried away with supplements. You read all the benefits, you read all these amazing things that they can do, and so you just want to try it all. You want to try all these things, and you know, without having the foundations dialed in, these supplements aren't going to help you all that much. You know, let's be honest. So.
Yeah, and so this is also the point of the podcast, is to help to bring clarity on what to use, what not to use, and in what specific scenarios. All right, the next mistake I see, and maybe I'll just run through my list and we can pinpoint something if that really stands out. So the first one is like diet is not dialed enough. Like no one that I ever meet, maybe like 5 to 10% of people that I work with actually has their diet really dialed in. Like people don't understand how important diet really is. They don't understand that there is actually a difference between white meat and red meat. They think it's like macros and just protein. It's more complicated than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And I had on that same topic really is also, you know, people will be very extreme with their diets or just not varied with their diets as well. So things like obviously the keto diet and things like that, you know, they work for certain things, but you know, there's pros and cons to all these, you know, to these extreme options. And, you know, and again, having a diet that isn't varied in nutrients is actually quite an extreme diet, and it's by itself, isn't it? You know, if you're not eating varied diets, then that's extreme in nature as well. So I definitely think that is one of the biggest things for diet, is too extreme and not varied enough.
Yeah, so like when you ask people like why you're doing this, and then well, it's supposed to be good. It's like, okay, well, have you tasted? Like, what does your symptoms say? Like, you have to go off
Yeah,
of those
yeah,
stuff as well.
yeah,
All right.
100%.
And then the next one is focusing on symptoms and not root causes. So this is quite common because like obviously the symptom is the reason why you want to get things fixed, but then you have to go deeper. Like if people come to you like, I want to fix my testosterone, or like this is a very common one. I want to fix my testosterone. So what should I do for testosterone? It's like, well, you should start with your diet and your gut health. And then people immediately like, what's the connection between gut health and testosterone? They don't understand that testosterone is actually like a symptom of good health.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's so true. Most people, they'll test. You know, I get a lot of people coming to me and they'll have done like a testosterone test from one of the labs that provides TRT as an option, right? And they'll go into the lab like you know 1 in the afternoon, and it tests one thing. It only tests testosterone, right? And it's like, oh, your testosterone is low, and so they think that the testosterone is low is the cause, but it's actually the symptom of the, you know, the underlying issues going on there. And obviously, unless you have more comprehensive information, you're never going to know why it, you know, you're never going to know why it's low and how to fix it. And so your only option there is then to follow them and get locked in on that subscription, you know.
Yeah, and then unfortunately, injecting testosterone is not solving the testosterone problem because the testosterone is just a symptom. So that doesn't make like these TRT doctors different from regular doctors that prescribe SSRIs for depression because it doesn't fix the root cause.
No, no, exactly. And whatever the root cause is going to be going on behind the scenes, continuing to cause problems. And it's not going to show in your testosterone, but it's going to show elsewhere. You know, it might show in your inflammation markers, it might show in your blood glucose or your lipids. It's going to show somewhere, isn't it? It's going to present itself somewhere.
Yeah, and then you get liver problems, and then they put you on something for that, and then you get cholesterol problems, and they put you on statins, and they all over the place. All right.
Exactly, yeah.
The other next problem I see with people is like they don't know when to apply which protocol, specifically when it comes to sequencing. And this can kind of like connect back to testosterone. It's like, all right, I want to use Tonkatali for my low motivation and drive. Well, it's like, okay, first
Yeah.
of all, you have gut issues. The endotoxin is inflaming your dopaminergic system and you end up with low dopamine and now you have no motivation drive. And using testosterone can help to an extent, but it's not going to fix that. And so the sequence is going to start with a gut, eat the right foods that's easy to digest, eliminate the ones that's causing inflammation, and maybe do a gut protocol.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, before anyone starts anything, I think looking at your digestion, looking at your gut health and things is just so important, because you can throw, you know, good nutrition and supplements down the hatch, and if you're not digesting, absorbing things efficiently, then it's not going to really improve your health that much. It's like I did a hair mineral analysis quite a while ago, and at the point in time I had it done, I was eating really well. I was eating my liver, I was eating my oysters, I had chicken hearts, I had the whole, I was doing the whole thing. But a lot of my nutrients and things came back deficient, and it's purely because at that point in time, stressful time, poor digestion, transit times too quick, all of these things. And so although I was eating the nutrients, I wasn't necessarily absorbing them. So it definitely is sensible to really look at that gut health and digestion first.
Yeah, we'll definitely address more because offline, off mic, we spoke about like transit time and some interesting things that you were experiencing, but we'll definitely address that in an upcoming episode.
Yeah,
Also,
yeah.
these two I find is very much connected. And so we have people that's relying too much on testing and not their symptoms. They always send me their labs and it's like, hey man, what do you think about my testosterone? I'm like, hey man, how do you feel? And then you have people that rely too much on their symptoms and they're not doing testing to find their root cause. But that is just as important. 100%. They want to focus on something that might not even be wrong. It's like because the root cause has not been identified yet.
Yeah. And the thing, I see that with some of the guys I work with as well. They're like, hey, look how good my testosterone levels are. And I'm like, and they don't actually feel very, they don't necessarily feel good. And it may be that their prolactin's through the roof, or their, or their SHBG is too high, or their estrogen's through the roof. And so they're just not feeling great, So it doesn't mean that much all by itself. You have to look at everything for that. And people, like you say, they don't really do that, or they just go purely on how they're feeling and actually don't delve into what's going on under the hood as well,
Yeah, like for example, if your DHT is already high and you think your DHT is low, and now you start boosting your DHT or taking DHT, like it's probably not going to help because your DHT is already fine, right? So you have to identify the real issue.
Exactly, and it's the same with lots of these. We're going to get onto this later, but just to touch on it quickly, a lot of people are treating, they're treating conditions that they don't have, aren't they? Or they don't know if they have. Yeah. The example I gave was a client who was the doctor tried to push him to get to take finasteride for hair loss, and they didn't measure DHT. So, it's just a very simple example, but it's very common for people to go, right, what's the best thing to lower my estrogen? And then on the bloods, their estrogen's low already. So lowering it further is not going to help. And in fact, it could have a negative outcome for them. So just because one person needs to lower their estrogen to improve their, estrogen to testosterone ratio, somebody else, they don't want to bring it down. So you do have to understand that and know that before you start trying to manipulate things on a micro level like that.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure you guys can understand like why we are so nuanced when we talk about stuff, because like there's never a one size fit all protocol. No. So that was kind of like all my points for what men get completely wrong. Do you have anything to add to that segment?
Yeah, so some of the things, I mean, these overlap, but there's definitely too heavy a focus on just calories and macros, especially, in the fitness world. So obviously with my background working mainly on like fitness stuff, body transformation stuff, there's just been a heavy focus on macronutrients and calories for the past 20 years without much thought on micronutrients and actually, providing your body with what it needs to function correctly rather than just energy balance. Because obviously energy balance is something it's a moving target based on how well your body's functioning and based on your activity levels. So for a lot of guys, when they're focused purely on macros, they don't realize that by doing that, their metabolic rate is going to be slowing down and things like that, because they're not providing their body with sufficient micronutrients. I mean, I think that's something that's really common. What do you think, Hans?
I've actually seen this many times before where people are exactly because of this, like, hey man, I want to go on a diet, I should eat cleaner or something like that. I'm going to go from beef and I'm going to eat chicken, or I'm going to go to fish, and then their testosterone like halves. And it's like, I don't know what's going on. Like 6 months ago, it was like double this. I don't know what's going on. It's like, well, man, let's have a look at your diet. Actually, it's not about macros. It's also about micros, and then the lipids, the peptides, all of those kind of stuff in the food that you're having.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did a post about this a while ago, which was like the low testosterone starter kit, right? And it's the overnight oats for breakfast with whey protein, and then chicken, brown rice, and broccoli 3 times a day. And it's whilst none of that stuff is bad necessarily in its own right,
Yeah.
if that's the only thing you're eating, there's going to be serious gaps in your nutrition, right? So that's where when people go on these aggressive cuts, yes, being in a calorie deficit can obviously reduce your testosterone levels and various other things. Primarily because obviously you're in a lower energy state, so it's saving energy for more important, for more crucial functions. But typically, the biggest mistake people make when they're trying to lose body fat is that they don't actually provide their body with the micronutrients and important essential things that they need, like maybe even carbohydrates, for things like testosterone function and optimizing things. So definitely a major thing that I see with people, especially when they're trying to lose weight.
Yeah. Like people have to understand that the oxidation, the burning of fat requires vitamins and minerals and things like carnitine. You can't just eat like chicken breast and take a fat burner. You're missing out on all of the
Yeah,
important
yeah.
B vitamins and minerals and so on.
Yeah, and it also, fat loss depletes a lot of really important
Yeah.
nutrients as well because, when you're burning fat, you're flooding your body with, all of these oxidized fats essentially, aren't you? You have to remember, people have to remember that their stored fat is fat too, and it has to be oxidized and burnt and utilized in that way. And that is very heavy on antioxidants because they have to try and reduce the negative effect that the oxidization of those fats has.
Yeah, and it's not just that. It's also where a lot of the fat soluble toxins, certain heavy metals, plastics, and so on is released from the fat stores. That's also burdening the liver while you're losing fat at the same time. And so the longer
Yeah,
you've been
yeah.
overweight, the more toxins you've been accumulating, the heavier of a burden is going to be on the liver.
Yeah, and the more, so therefore the more you have to support those processes while you're trying to drop body fat. So you need to up things that are going to support liver health, up things that are going to up your antioxidant intakes. I mean, in particular, probably more of the animal based ones rather than like the supplement versions. But definitely supporting those processes as heavily as possible.
Yeah, that's true. All right, do you have one more, or are we going to switch over to the next one?
Yeah, yeah. So one of the other things I think there's two. One's super quick. One is just that a lot of the time people it's medications first, right? So they go to the doctors and it's a one test. What's your cholesterol? It's one test. What's your blood fasting blood glucose? One test. Testosterone, one test. And so it's definitely, and then it's a prescription. So there's definitely an argument to look at the bigger picture there and go food first on that. Always like go food first. So that's real quick. And then the other one is just overtraining. So a lot of the time people are training too much or too little. There's in general people fall into one of those two camps. And obviously, from a performance standpoint, I think that it's more performance related where people are, potentially overtraining, doing too much volume, too many sets, all of these things, which just are going to slow down their progress. That's all.
Yeah, especially if they're eating like chicken breast and rice, not even getting the nutrients to recover from that volume.
Yeah, exactly that.
All right, let's move on to the next segment. So, what problem were you personally trying to solve when you started going this deep? And so, let's start with you with this one.
Yeah, so for me, I qualified as a personal trainer when I turned 18 years old. So I started my course when I was 17. So I've been a personal trainer for over 20 years. And so for me, a lot of it, and actually before that, I was obviously into sports and things as well. So, I started taking supplements when I was around maybe 12 years old. I used to cycle, I was a road cyclist for a while. at a high level as a junior. So I won national medals as a junior in the UK and like raced against people in the who then went on to win Olympic gold medals and things like this, right? And I was already, the cycling, at that point in time, we were using bicarbonate soda. We were using like a Pro Plus tablet under the tongue. I was like 14 years old, but you do what you have to do. And then obviously I got into personal training, and I think for me then the initial attraction was like, how do I get in shape? How do I get jacked? How do I get shredded? So that was definitely the initial thing I looked at. I guess this was a long time ago as well, where biohacking didn't exist to the same extent, right? So there wasn't necessarily the understanding and information out there, and so it wasn't until I got into my 20s and 30s that I started thinking more about testosterone function and all these types of things, and I definitely dived in more from that. But yeah, initially it was definitely to be like, how do I gain muscle? How do I get shredded? Like they were the main things.
How did you then end up in the health aspect of things?
So that definitely something that progressed as I got older. So I mean, I remember the first time I got my testosterone checked, I was probably in my mid-20s, something like this, and I seem to remember it was like around 600 or something like that. It was at a point in time where I was doing a huge amount of training. I was probably like dieting down at that point in time, and I was definitely an oats and whey protein type of guy at that point, right? I would have been eating very low carb, probably for the most part. I was incorporating some carb cycling and things like that, which I think is great and is a great way of doing things. So it wasn't all bad what I was doing then, but I certainly wasn't like nutrient maxing to any extent, and it showed in the blood work, obviously. And then from that point onwards, I also had prescriptions for medications that I don't feel I ever should have been, on, and things like that. So early age statins. So I was first prescribed statins when I was about 18 for high cholesterol, obviously. So I have, it's like a hereditary high cholesterol, which we'll cover in a lot more detail later on. And then also in my, I guess, early to mid 20s, I was put on to some SSRIs for anxiety issues. And I think that was really the turning point in the shift from like body composition to health focus, because those things, they crushed my energy. They were brutal for me. And so it was quite a long climb to get back to health after that, to be honest.
Yeah, you mentioned like you were using statins for high cholesterol, obviously, and it's like, no, I actually had too much coenzyme Q10, and they wanted to bring that down. That's why they put me on statins. Oh my gosh.
Exactly. I mean, I will cover this in a bit more detail later on, but obviously, this is part of my problem with the system around this, is that I went in, I had my, they probably just measured total cholesterol. They probably didn't, I don't remember, but they certainly didn't look at anything else. They didn't look at my blood sugar levels. They didn't track my HbA1c. They didn't look at inflammation markers. They didn't ask me about digestion or any of these things. So it was, it was, and so I started taking them. I'm glad I didn't actually take them for very long. I took them for maybe a few months, but I suffered with lots of the common symptoms that people get, sort of the pain in muscles and those sorts of things. Just didn't feel myself.
Yeah, so the interesting things for you guys that we are going to be talking about is like David is experimenting like a madman when it comes to compounds to manage his cholesterol. And he's fluctuated all over the place, up to 500, I think was the highest, and then all the way down to like 150. So this is like very, very interesting experiments to see the best natural compounds of how to modulate cholesterol levels in someone that's not hypothyroid. It's someone that's actually got this genetic mutation.
Yeah. So I did genetic testing last year, and I have like nearly like all of the bad cholesterol gene issues, not just like one, not just two, but I have the LDLR one. I have I have every single one of them, I think. And so for me, I can go on a zero cholesterol diet and my cholesterol will be 400 still. So it makes no, like, it makes no difference to me, because my body is just overproducing cholesterol the whole time, because the various mechanisms that are at play are basically just drastically reducing my LDL receptors, so that my body doesn't recognize how much cholesterol I have, or that the cholesterol isn't binding to it, and so it just continues to overproduce it. So it's a really interesting journey for me on experimenting with different things that have had varying degrees of success, which we'll cover in more detail as we go.
Yeah, for sure. So be on the lookout for that. All right. So for me, why I got into this is initially I also just got interested in just building muscle. I think it was for me as a young guy, it's like, oh, it's going to help with confidence. It's going to help demand respect. People's going to look up to you. You're going to become more desirable. I think a lot of those is just what a lot of young guys want in the first place. And so that's why I got into it. And then when I was 21, I actually learned about testosterone for the first time. I knew about like men had testosterone, I knew women had estrogen, like those basic stuff. But I never even knew you could modulate your hormones naturally. And that's when I discovered that. I was like, wow, this is amazing. So you mean I can have improved sexual function?
You can modulate hormones naturally, can you? I mean, I'm only joking, because the amount of time people say that food and supplements, they don't do anything. It's your genetic. No. But sorry to interrupt. I just thought that was funny.
Yeah. We can definitely talk a lot more about that. So that's when I learned like it could be modulated, not just testosterone, but your estrogen and prolactin. I learned about all of these hormones, and I went completely bananas. Tried like disgusting shakes, so many supplements, didn't give a shit about brand or quality or anything like that. I was probably consuming toxins all over the place, but that was kind of like how I got into it. And then not too long after that, about like a year or two of getting into natural testosterone optimization, this is when we started our own business, and like we were under severe stress, financial stress, but environmental stress, like all kinds of stressors. And this is where most of my health issues began. And so I was like, okay, I have to put testosterone aside to fix the health issues. And that's where I kind of like learned how everything is actually so connected, like gut issues, the allergies that you have, skin issues, sleeping problems, like all of these are so connected, and the testosterone is just ultimately a symptom. And now I just never really fix on testosterone specifically, because it is going to go up when you are healthy. And then obviously in some cases you do see people that's just doing whatever the hell they want, and then they end up with high testosterone, but they are the exception. People shouldn't be looking to them as like, but they're eating oats and whey and those kind of stuff. It's like, yeah, maybe it's working for them. It's kind of like that grandma that's in her like early hundreds that's like drinking whiskey and smoking cigars all day. And it's like, well, that's not normal.
No, exactly. Yeah, I mean, we talked about this briefly the other day, where I said that like, if I didn't have the kind of the issues with maybe cholesterol, or being through periods where my testosterone wasn't very high particularly, and things like I've struggled with blood sugar control and things, if all of those things were just perfect all the time, then I would have never done any of this investigation. I would never learn anything. I would never have gone down this route. So whilst it's not good to have health complaints and health issues, it's for people like you and I, Hans, it's fun or it's useful to have them, because we enjoy the challenge of trying to overcome these things, right? That's it's part of this. Is not just it's like when something clicks and you go, wow, that actually that works way better than I thought. It's really exciting when that happens.
Yeah, when you do like an experiment, you look at the labs, holy moly, this was so good. Yeah,
I know. And then on the flip side, you do it and you're like, oh man, I've just like destroyed my body for 2 weeks.
Yeah, 2 steps back.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
But this is the fun, because like what we're doing is so much pioneer work, right? Like very few people are doing this. Like they are like research junkies. They just look at the studies and like, this is what the research shows. And it's like, bro, what does your lab say? Like, what does your experiment say? It's like, oh, you haven't done it? Okay.
Yeah, I know, 100%. It's just, with the labs, it's like that, and also a lot of these people are not testing, and we you and I know this within the fitness world. There's almost zero transparency, right? So one of the big things I want to talk about part of the reason for doing this is transparency in what we're doing, because there's so many people that will post blood work and they're on, they blur out the things because they're on TRT because their LH is so low, but they're like, yeah, my T is like 1200, and it's just there's no transparency. It's like smoke and mirrors in this game. And to be honest, that applies to all the influence, a lot of the influences at the moment. But it also, I think, it applies to a lot of the clinical trials as well. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in clinical trials, and just I'm not saying like they're like completely pulling the wool over our eyes, but there's definitely selective data there that influences end results and things like that. In certain cases. So I think to have some transparency on some of this is going to be really exciting for people, where we're not going to hide anything. We're just going to show what's actually going on.
Yeah. So in terms of transparency, I have been doing natural testosterone optimization for 10 years. And then I decided, I feel like I've researched everything there is to research. I've tested almost every single supplement, not as extensively as I'm doing now. And then I was like, okay, you know what? I've maxed out my testosterone. I feel amazing. I don't have any problems anymore when it comes to testosterone hormones. Let's go on testosterone, because I've always been looking up to someone like Mike Hearn. Like, he's huge, and then there's a lot of controversy if it's natural or not. I don't think it's natural. I used to think he was natural for a long time. He's very much not natural. Anyway, so when you look at even all of the Instagram influencers, right? You just mentioned so many of them, almost all of them are using something. And then when you as a natty guy, you need it to be very lean. You need to have a great pump, and then you're flexing, and then you're looking maybe on par with it. Put on a shirt, no one will guess you actually lift. And so I freaking hate that. It's I want to have more muscle that you can achieve naturally. I don't have the best Enzima genetics, so I'm just gonna use a little something. So that's there for the clarity on it. And what makes this even more interesting is that people think now that I'm cheating or now it's confounding variables. What makes this actually very clear is that now that I'm on testosterone, I can see all of the other variables, right, in health, because my testosterone is now the constant in the protocols that I'm doing. So it actually gives more clarity, not less.
Yeah, I think, and it's actually really useful, because when I'm getting my blood work done, my testosterone can fluctuate by large, by pretty big degrees over short spaces of time, within hours, obviously throughout the day as the day progresses and things like that. I've actually got a kit for testing testosterone at home, and I did a couple of experiments just recently where I would test it first thing in the morning when I wake up, maybe around 7 a.m., and then test it again around noon. And, you're talking about a 25-30% reduction in testosterone just in that window of time, which is normal. But it's a big variable, obviously, because then everything else is going to, is going to move around that. For me, I've always personally preferred the leaner look, to be more lean, to have that leaner look. But as Hans says, even at TRT doses, you're going to get some muscle gain. But really, if you want to maximize out your muscle gain, you do have to push things a little bit out of that natural range, obviously. So for anyone who is looking to build a more unnatural amount of muscle, then that's the process that you kind of have to, that's the route you have to go down, regardless of how much you can maximize your natural testosterone. Because, there's studies on natural testosterone and muscle growth, and it doesn't make that much difference. Yeah. Testosterone by itself doesn't make very much difference. It's if you go for a synthetic type of testosterone, you get a new mechanism of muscle growth, which you didn't have before. And so there's very interesting, concepts around that people are like, hey, if I maximize my natural testosterone, I'm going to get jacked in weeks. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't. Mine's been hovering between 900 and sort of 1200 all this year, and I've definitely gained muscle a little bit more quickly than I have, but I'm far from seeing huge benefits from it, essentially. Yeah. So there's definitely benefits, but they're much more down to the psychological side of things. So people with high testosterone levels do have more muscle mass, but it's not from a physiological standpoint. It's much more from a psychological standpoint. They're more motivated. They get up and they go train, right?
Yeah.
That's why they have more muscle. It's because they get up and they go train. And so it's just an interesting area. I think we'll cover this in loads more detail down the line. But the limitations between natural top level testosterone, maybe synthetic top level testosterone, and then the next level up from that as well, essentially.
Yeah. Just one more sentence before we go on. I'm using only testosterone. I'm not using any of the other synthetic stuff like Tren, Deca, or whatever people are using. I prefer the bioidentical stuff because that's the least likely to cause any kind of side effects. Because if you look at the studies on even something like Deca, and this is just animal research, but you see it modulates neurotransmitters and neurotransmitter receptor, and it can cause all kinds of neurological issues and other health issues that I don't think everyone is really aware of. And then you have like Tren and all of these synthetic stuff. We don't really know the safety profile. So eventually, even if it's quote unquote safe like Masteron, like it's not going to destroy your health, like we don't know what it's doing to the testes, the Leydig cells, on a deeper level. And then eventually if you want to come off, it's like, well, now my Leydig cells has been destroyed. And the thing is, like, testosterone by itself is not harmful to the Leydig cells. So even if I want to reduce the dose or come off in 10 years, my testosterone is just going to go back to normal because my Leydig cells is completely working. And the pituitary is like, okay, testosterone is low, let's just ramp up LH again. There's no long-term consequences.
Yeah, and then also you don't rely on like aromatase inhibitors or anything like that either, do you? I don't think.
No. Like I was initially, but then I decided like I don't like this.
You have to find a balance, right?
Yeah. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Like this is getting long in the tooth, but I freaking love this. All right, so what broke your faith in mainstream health advice? So I'll go first on this one. So I was like never into medicine to begin with, just because like I didn't think it was going to help me achieve my goals, given that my goals initially was just like get more jack and more lean. That was kind of like my main goals. And so it was like whey, creatine, like the muscle building supplements, not pharmaceuticals. And later on, as I started to get health issues and got more into health, I started realizing like, okay, doctors are just prescribing medicine to blunt symptoms, right? Like you just mentioned, oh, I got hair loss, I'm going to go finasteride. Did they test your DHT? No, they didn't. Oh, okay. Or like worst case scenario, you go into the doctor, you say you have achy joints, and then they have this checklist. You have arthritis. Did you do any tests? No. Now, I'm the doctor, you're supposed to listen to me. It's like, dude, the amount of misdiagnosis from doctors is just absolutely staggering, and then they prescribe the wrong drugs, and all of which have side effects. So I'm not like anti-drug or anything. I still think they can be helpful, but I don't think that should be the first approach in most cases.
Yeah. I mean, I touched on this already a little bit earlier, but for me, definitely my experiences with being put onto statins at a very young age, being put onto SSRIs, and both of those things without correct testing and without without a good understanding of the negative implications of those. I don't think they ever break down, or they never really broke down to me. Right. I know if you like go through the label, probably you'll find in the small print, you'll find the side effects. But for me, they definitely didn't go through the potential problems, and they didn't test anything. For SSRIs, there was no blood test whatsoever, not a single blood test. And mood is related to so many things, isn't it? Yeah. Mitochondrial function, energy production, sleep, circadian rhythm, vitamins, minerals, hormones. And they didn't look at a single thing. It was just based on how I felt and then the conversation that we had. And I think that for me at that time, there was loads of things going on that probably would have showed up in blood work, inflammation, vitamin deficiencies, like high estrogen, high prolactin, who knows, right? Who knows what was going on? And they created a whole new set of problems for me over the time I took them because they didn't work. So they just dosed them up higher and higher and higher and higher until I was taking like the highest possible limit of these drugs that you can prescribe, right? Yeah. It's like I went in, it's like it doesn't work. They're like, well, take twice as much. I go back in, it doesn't work. Take twice as much again, And so I was taking the absolute upper limit of these SSRIs, and it completely changed who I was as a person. Like I didn't recognize who I was as a person. And so then it took me, several years to then kind of fix things out and get out of that process. And I know that, some people are gonna say that SSRIs are really good and really important and everything else, and that's absolutely fine. I appreciate that take on it, but for me personally, it did not solve any of my problems. It made my problems worse, and so I had to dig myself out of that through, opening Google and reading. So for me, those are the main things that broke my faith in mainstream health advice. And then, I think now in this day and age, it's like the TRT side of things. It's the same. It's the same thing for me. I have guys coming to me who speak to me and they're on TRT all the time, and I'm like, they're injecting twice a week and their testosterone's 700 and their estrogen's through the roof, and I'm like, because they're injecting 1 day a week, right? And so they're not spreading out the dose, so they get one big hit of testosterone and then a huge hit of estrogen because their testosterone's gone up so high. And it's like, if the person just told them to like spread their injection out over 3 or 4 days per week, they probably wouldn't need to then take the AIs that go with the testosterone and all of these things. And so it's just looking at pure symptoms and not looking at any kind of information and data as to why those symptoms are presenting themselves. And I'm seeing that all the time. So it's like people are taking all this stuff just to have suboptimal natty levels of testosterone. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. Like, take it I understand the concept of taking testosterone. Like, it's like, yeah, if you want to get really fucking jacked and lean, testosterone's great. But if you just want to get your levels up to a point where you feel good, like energy wise, libido wise, motivation, energy, you don't necessarily need to go down that route.
Yeah. You mentioned something, and it's like kind of like the keto guys, right? It's like you just need to double the dose with the SSRIs, what you mentioned. So the keto guys is like, oh, dude, I'm still having cold hands and feet. I'm feeling anxious and jittery. And it's like, dude, your carbs are too high. You should lower your carbs, like double down, right? It's like, oh, now it's worse. No, it's still too high.
Yeah, you just cut them down. Yeah, I know. The keto ones, it's a really interesting one. It's obviously a huge, there's a huge kind of sort of following and support with it, and a lot of those guys aren't feeling and looking too healthy from what I understand in the discussions that I've had. It's thyroid, potential thyroid issues, obviously. The lipids is really interesting because you see their lipids just go through the roof, and it's because insulin's really useful. Insulin's amazing, and if you don't ever have any kind of decent insulin production, then you can have limited diversion of anything in your blood, fats, carbs, whatever, and so it's like, it's no surprise your lipids are going through the roof because your fats are up and you haven't got any insulin to direct them, so they sit in your blood.
Yeah. Some people would argue it's fine. Other people would say it's not fine. I think it's a lot of nuance that a lot of people are overlooking. It's not as simple as like good or bad.
Yeah, I mean, especially with the LDL side of things, it's like I definitely think there's a healthy range that sits probably higher than what doctors are trying to promote. But I know from how I feel, if it's sitting at 500, like mine has done in the past, you don't feel great. Yeah. It's not, that is not good for you. That is too high. Yeah. When it's that high, you're going to have inflammation. You're going to have, you're going to have problems with that. So you just, whilst cholesterol is very valuable for everything that's going on, like anything, there's sensible ranges for this stuff.
Yeah, it's also about the utilization. It doesn't help. It's just circulating in the blood.
No, it doesn't. No, absolutely.
All right, so let's move on to the next one. How do you actually think about the body when it comes to step-by-step fixing someone, or how it kind of like works, importance, priorities?
Yeah. So I think we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but I think digestion has to come first to an extent in how I think about things. And so that would be looking at any kind of digestive symptoms that somebody or might have, or you might have, and then addressing those, because regardless of what you do in the steps after that, there's going to be varying degrees of success depending on how your digestion is. So starting with really simple steps, chewing your food properly, not rushing your meal times, not being stressed at meal times, not diluting your food with stacks of water, like not drinking a liter of water with your meal to dilute your stomach. I used to do that when I was in my 20s. I'd have 2 pints of water with my meal, and I'd be like, why am I so bloated all the time?
God.
And I'm like, since the last maybe 10 years, I won't drink any liquids apart from a little red wine for for 15 to 20 minutes before and after my meals, and my digestion's way better. It's just these things. So digestion first, nutrients from food, crucial. Varied nutrients. If people can test their if they can get hair mineral analysis done or something along those lines, and just see what those gaps are, and then plug it with food. If your zinc's low, eat zinc-rich food. If your selenium's low, eat selenium-rich food. You're going to utilize it better. You're going to adapt better to the mixture of nutrients within that food as well, rather than just going single nutrients. And then I definitely think supplements are fantastic for filling gaps. If somebody has allergies, they can't eat certain. If you have a shellfish allergy, then yeah, sure. Let's look at some ways of getting a nice balance of zinc and things like that. If nutrition is really problematic, and also like myself, if somebody does have problems with certain genetic considerations, then there are actually really useful supplements, herbal supplements that have effect at a gene level. And so that's a really interesting thing if somebody's interested in taking things that step further and doing a little bit of genetic investigation. It's expensive, it's very complicated, it's very difficult to get good information and data about it because it's millions of strands, they just check, it's millions of little sections of information you have to work through. But there are supplements that can fill some of those gaps that you may not be able to with diet alone, because foods won't necessarily have that same effect on certain things. And for me personally, I like to go down the natural route. It's not that I'm against peptides. It's not that I'm against using things like testosterone or anything. I'm not against it at all. It's just my interests lie within natural compounds. And so it's purely based on the fact that that's what gets me more excited to experiment with and try. And I think for the most part, you can solve a huge amount of your problems with nutrition and supplementation, and therefore don't necessarily need to go down the peptides route and things like that. Yeah. I think that's sort of my kind of basic starting process there, and how I see things. I think for you, Hans, you've got more to add to that as well, haven't you?
Yeah, I think we see things so similar, so which is great. I have two main rules. The first one is you have to eat nutrient-dense foods, because the body is not going to work without vitamins and minerals, and you can't just supplement. It's like you do a blood test for B12 and it's low, and then you want to supplement as well. It's actually not as simple as just, you can't live on a elemental diet for the rest of your life. There's thousands of compounds in foods that you're going to be missing out. So eat a nutrient-dense diet and make sure it's coming from food. Food always beats supplements. And then the second one is eliminate all inflammation. Because inflammation, anything that causes oxidative stress, is going to damage your cells in the body, the DNA, the mitochondria. We can get so technical on this, but it's damaging it. And if the cells aren't working, it doesn't really help if you have vitamins and minerals. Vitamins and minerals can help to protect against oxidative stress and inflammation by managing it, but it's not going to prevent it. So if you have gut issues, you have endotoxin, you're exposed to heavy metals, you're exposed to an excessive amount of plastics, get rid of that, right? You're going to function so much better if you just manage that. And that's my two main rules. And obviously, when it comes to rule number 2, which is eliminate inflammation, most of that is coming from the gut and digestion that you spoke about. It's when I'm working with people, I'm filling out their health reports. So many people are highly stressed, which then causes digestive issues. If you're going on holiday, you're calm, you're feeling so much better, your digestion improved. And it's okay, you got to manage the stress or at least just improve your digestion, even if you are stressed, which you can do, and there's certain
Yeah.
rules and stuff that you can follow. So that's kind of like my two main rules. And then I want to mention about the peptides thing that you also mentioned, because this is so important.
Yeah.
I'm not again. I love peptides, and we have people that's absolute peptide fanatics, right? So I love peptides because it's naturally found in the body. It can actually improve your health in a very meaningful way. Let's look at some of the mitochondrial peptides like MOTS-e. You have SS31, which stabilizes the cardiolipin, so the mitochondria, the electron transport chain, can actually work, can actually produce the energy. Now the thing is, like, if you have a zinc deficiency or you have a B2 deficiency, you're just producing more mitochondria that's not going to work. You're just stabilizing something that's not going to work without that cofactor, and it's causing oxidative stress to begin with. So with peptides, if there's a other underlying issue, right, you're fixing the wrong thing. You're focusing on the wrong thing, and so like you're gonna feel a little bit better with a peptide, but you're not gonna solve it.
Yeah.
And when you actually solve your B2 or carnitine or coenzyme A bottleneck, boom, you're not even gonna need the peptide anymore. The energy problem
Yeah.
is going to go away.
Like, I think if I was looking at something for myself where I was like, right, I want to maximize my capacity for, like endurance or something like that. And so you do all of the things to optimize mitochondrial function, and then you go, right, that's all dialed in. Then, yeah, maybe you'd add some MOTS-e on top of that, and you're going to be on fire. You'll be supercharged, won't you? But as you said, if your mitochondria is not functioning well, if you're producing lots of like negative, compounds through metabolism, for example, through poor carbohydrate metabolism or poor fat metabolism or whatever it might be, then potentially any of these things that are accelerating metabolism or increasing the number of mitochondria, for example, might actually be adding more fuel to the fire of inflammation or problems in the first place. Because if it's not functioning correctly, that's part of the reason why it's slowing down its processing, because it wants less of the negative byproducts. It wants less of the problems that it's causing. And so you do have to direct your energy and attention to that sort of thing first. And I do think that there's huge purpose and function of the peptides. But I do think most people jump onto that before considering anything that they could have done with or without looking at a detailed approach to nutrition beforehand.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%. All right, like I feel like we could talk so much more about this, but let's move on to the next one. All right, the next one is, why are people stuck in trial and error mode too long? So for me, I would say I'm just going to list off my list here. So they focus on the wrong symptom. So for example, testosterone is the problem, and they over obsess about it. And then later they realize it's health. And then they're like, you know what, I'm going to optimize my health, and then I'm going to come back to testosterone. It's like, okay, but the way you optimize your testosterone is by optimizing your health, right? So always like this wrong thing. Then they do the wrong sequence of application, right? They don't understand exactly what the root cause is. And so when they do protocols, it's not in the right sequence to fix the sequence of how things are going wrong. There's an excessive focus on herbs, supplements, and peptides where they have not addressed nutritional deficiencies or gotten rid of inflammation in the body. And sometimes people just don't know that the symptoms that they are having, like waking up fatigued in the morning, is actually nutritional deficiency, or it's caused by inflammation. Or they don't even know that pooping for longer than 10 minutes is actually a sign that you have slow transit time. There's intestinal inflammation. You need to focus on that. All right, then we have not doing testing. I would say like relying on symptoms is extremely important, and you can actually have funky lab markers even while having no symptoms. So this is why it's important to test even if you feel amazing. Like I would like for someone just to test comprehensively just once, just to see what's going on, right? And maybe like followed by genetic test. Like if you really want to dial it in, I'm going to buy mine soon, and then I will have data. We can talk about that in a future episode as well. All right, they follow experts online with wacky theories, and like an example of this would be like the vitamin A, right? So someone that's come up with a new theory, and when you actually read the books, it's just a lot of association. There's not a lot of research, there's a lot of speculation and theory, right? So people jump on and it's like, oh, this is amazing, or like low protein might be like the key to health, and then it's like, where do you get the studies from? Oh, it's a wacky in vitro theory from animals, and they come up with wacky stuff, and people just jump on it because it's like new and it's novel, and they think it's going to solve issues, and I think that's a problem.
Yeah, and also with all of those lots of those large studies around that sort of thing, it's correlation. It's speculative, isn't it? Because there's far too many variables within any of that sort of information to pinpoint one thing directly being good or bad, isn't there? You know, it's in a lot of them, especially in studies out in the wild, like not in a controlled setting. And people will then just follow that information blindly rather than actually assessing their own health based on the information and you can read something and go, right, this thing says that this happens, and you do it and it doesn't happen to you. I think that is so important. We are not the average of a study. Within the studies, within the studies that we read, some of these studies might show a 50% benefit in some marker, and that's maybe a small section of the study have seen positive benefits. Some of them will have seen no benefits. Some of them will have got worse.
Yeah.
And we look at the study, and it gives us an average. It doesn't give us insight into where we fit within that range of results. And that's where things like genetic testing and things are so interesting, is because then you can start to understand where you do fit in within that range, based on how you're going to respond to something. You and I have had different experiences with different compounds because we do have different levels of functioning genetics that will respond to things in different ways.
Yeah, that's true, because I was just thinking of something. It will come back to me. Oh yeah, someone, like, with all of these experiments that I'm doing, someone tells me, like, your experience doesn't matter because it's only you. And my response is like, that's the only thing that matters because it's me. It matters to me. Right? I'm not gonna, you know what I mean? So it's exactly what you're saying. Like, we are not the average of a study. You're your unique individual, and that's only that matters.
Yeah, I saw a study recently which was done on 10 people, and it was on pine pollen. I think it was pine pollen or something along those lines. And it showed like a very large increase in testosterone. And it was, 10 people. I'd say like 4 or 5 of them didn't really see anything. A few of them saw a little benefit, and one guy went from quadrupled his testosterone in like weeks or whatever. Like, it was ridiculous. He went from like 200 to like 900. It was bonkers. And then that just brings and maybe just maybe there was something else impacting that one guy's testosterone. But basically, that one dude carried the whole study.
Yeah.
And it's those interesting things, right?
Yeah, a similar study was with aspirin, where aspirin massively increases, like, that's the takeaway, right? Aspirin massively increases testosterone. So one of the guys even went to I think 1,200. And then when you look at the individual data, it's like 50% of the individuals didn't even respond to the aspirin. And then only 4 guys had an increase. And so that's so important, like, why you need to be doing your own testing. And this is why I focus on food, is because it's so much easier to identify, like, we all need vitamins and minerals. We all need to optimize our digestion. And like, this is all of the things that we all have in common versus the supplement and the herbs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it gets much more complicated.
It does, yeah. With food, as you say, we all need the same things for our body to function in an efficient way. We need the same cofactors. We need the same raw ingredients, and so diet, obviously, as a foundation, is absolutely crucial. And just to come back to where we were on that list, I think that people being stuck in the old ways of their diet is something that I put on there, because they're not challenging themselves to try new things and experiment and add new foods in. They're a lot of the time, I think you probably see this too, where somebody maybe has got in shape once before in their life, or they've lost weight once before in their life, and they're like, yeah, I did it by eating salads. And there's an association with the result, and a particular type, I did it by going keto, I did it by doing something. And so there's not necessarily the thought process to experiment with new processes and things like that. It's like people go back to their default of chicken brown rice and broccoli. It's that sort of thing. A lot of the people are also, because they're not necessarily doing that, then their focus becomes too much on supplements, because they're not challenging their diet. They're not adding in a nutrient-rich diet of varied foods. They're not thinking about personalization. So this is, obviously we talked about, especially from a supplement perspective, we need to look at our own issues, problems, successes, and make decisions based on that, based on blood work and based on data. And also, I think a lot of people, they're only looking at single markers. So still, most of the guys that come to me, they'll be like, yeah, I got my testosterone done, and they literally only got their testosterone test, checked. Yeah. And so they're not looking at a broad range of markers enough to make real progress either.
Yeah, it was like, that was not useful.
No. It's useful as a marker as to whether things are going good or bad, I guess, but not why they're, is it good or bad, yes or no? The other information explains, potentially why it's good or bad, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I recommend also people to test comprehensively. But even better than that is to test frequently, because that's when you see the trends of how things are actually moving.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, so next one. What does your experimentation framework actually look like when you go about doing your regular experiments? Let's say you would have to start with someone new. What's like step 1 to 10, I guess?
Yeah, so do you want to go through this first, Hans, or do you want me to do this one?
You can go ahead.
Okay, fine. So in terms of like an experimentation, for myself, I am very guilty in the past of being like, right, I'm going to get everything in my supplement cupboard and I'm going to take it all. And then I'm going to get my blood work done. And then I'm going to see what's happened, right? And like, this is something, I think, I have to thank you for helping me to, I'm like, I just want to try everything. I'm like 3 days into a test. And I'm like, oh man, maybe I should add this to my test, and so seeing the work that you're doing on your testing has inspired me to test better. I've got results on my natty testosterone at 1500, right? Yeah. And I don't know how I did it. Because I look at the list of things I was taking. I'm taking 10 herbs.
Yeah.
Right? And so for myself, my testing process has been bad, and it's getting better. And for this, for doing this podcast long term, and for adding this information to like my social media, to our groups and wherever else, my testing process is now dialed in, right? So, for clients, I think it's sensible to do some kind of supplement washout period before they do any testing, because a lot of the time when I work with a new client, they're also taking a huge amount of supplements.
Yeah.
And interestingly, we don't necessarily know if someone comes to you and they're taking 20 supplements, which is not uncommon, is it? Right? In this world of kind of biohacking, things like that, 20 is like that's quite a low level, I think, for some people.
Yeah, the standard.
Yeah, and so if they do a washout of that for even just for a week, right? Just to see where the baseline sits, and then obviously from there, I think then you can really start to pinpoint the areas that they may need to look to improve. I think from that point, you'd be selective with working through a couple of things at a time, no more, depending on how severe if it comes back and it's like there's actually harmful and dangerous things in there, then you can't be that selective with what you're going to try and optimize. You have to go, right, your cholesterol's 500, let's probably do something about that. And also your HbA1c is through the roof, so let's consider that too. So you might have to wrap those things up together. If and then you would test nutrition, test supplements, however you thought you could best deal with it, and then test again for outcomes. For me, if they came to me and they're like, everything's solid, but maybe testosterone's just sitting a little lower than where they would want it to be. Maybe estrogen's a little high, or maybe prolactin's a little high, or something quite basic. You can fix that. Like, I mean, you and I know estrogen. So many people have struggled with high estrogen for decades, and it's actually it's a pretty easy thing to tank if you need
Yeah.
to, just with food and herbs, and various other things. Um, if they've got things like high levels of body fat, that's going to make it obviously harder, because the higher their body fat, the more aromatase they're going to potentially have, and so they are going to have more conversion. But ultimately, I think you break it down into those things, and that way, rather than having a scatter approach for diet and supplements, you can have a more focused one.
Yeah. That's good. That's more or less how I would do it as well. So for myself, this is kind of like how I refined the process. But if I had to start over, this is what I would do. So first of all is you create a foundation for the person. So the foods that they will be able to eat that is the most nutrient dense, coming from the top 5 testosterone superfoods, how I classify them. So maximize nutrient density, and then maximize for digestibility, and then maximize for what they will be able to do long term. So that might be like food prepping, cravings, and those kind of stuff, right? So you just create the foundation of micronutrients, digestibility, optimizing gut health. Then you take it the next level, because like some people might have more advanced nutritional deficiency, so to speak. So this is where you then mega dose certain of the superfoods to really supercharge those nutrient intakes. And then people's like, they suddenly realize that they feel a lot better with this specific one. And then you can start to say like, okay, maybe you do really good on this food because of this reason. And so as you go along, you're technically just creating theories and hypotheses as to what's really going on with this person, because unless you have been doing extremely comprehensive testing for a very long time, you don't really know what's going on with your own body. Right? Even if you do labs, if you do an organic acid test, if you do a stool test, all of it is information. But at the end of the day, you're still creating a hypothesis as to what you do based on. And then you try those compounds and you respond well. And that just reinforces the hypothesis, right? So you just do more of what you feel good on. Then I like to taste the... one of the things I'm getting more and more interested in is like the idea of like a food supplement. Like when most people look at a diet or food, it's just like food is food is food. They don't realize there's a difference between red meat and white meat. They don't realize that something like enoki mushroom is extremely high in adenosine, so it can help with blood flow, can help with sleep, can actually increase your testosterone as well. Right, you have white button mushroom that is great for lowering inflammation, great for lowering your estrogen. So that, in my opinion, is not just a condiment. It's not something you just sprinkle into your food. It's like a food supplement that you supplement at a certain dose for a specific outcome. And in my opinion, food supplements are much more powerful than like herbal supplements, right? Because it's like a food, you can have it like all the time. All right, so that's some of the initial steps, and then you do testing, right? So you've created the baseline, you've done your experiments, you do a test to see where's the baseline. Then you change one variable, you mega dose a food, for example, you try a new supplement, and you test, and you try something new, and you test. Like, if you're really interested in optimization, that's the path I would go. If someone is just like, I just want to feel better, it's like, okay, implement this, and we just go off with symptoms. When we dial along the way to make sure that you're eating the most nutrient-dense foods, you're not being stressed, your digestion is optimized, and your bowel movements are optimal. Those are kind of like the things that I look at and how I approach it.
100%. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think I think that it's a really, I mean, with your approach, what's so good about the way you do things, hands, with this is because you've done it. How many tests have you ran, right? You've done this process so many times. Like I've run lots of blood tests, but I've never been structured in the way in which I've prepared myself for them. It has been more of a scatter approach, and like I say, I think that's why sometimes my results can swing in quite large amounts. And sometimes I'll be doing something and I think I'm doing great with it, and the blood tests come back and they're not good. So it's interesting. And I mean, you've done, how many tests have you done? Hundreds, right?
Yeah, at least over 50 blood tests. Then I've done a couple of stool tests, organic acid tests, heavy metal tests, like all of these kind of tests. I think it's close to 100 blood tests so far, but it's definitely over 50.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And that's just going to continue. And like every time I'm testing,
100%.
it's quite comprehensive. Yeah, it's not just like looking at total cholesterol or total testosterone. It's like quite comprehensive list.
Yeah, which, I mean, that's where the insight is so useful. Like, you did a test on a clone of Carver recently, right? And it did things, there are areas within that that we would like, you wouldn't have, I certainly didn't expect to see, like Hans did it, he has it on his Substack, and there was results in that I didn't expect to see, but they were there, and so it was really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you test comprehensively, because and this is why this is pioneer work that we are doing, because you don't even know, I didn't know white button mushroom is so great for lowering inflammation and then improving liver function unless you actually tested it, right? So this is why I'm so pro not just testing, but testing comprehensively and testing repeatedly
Yeah.
for someone that's
Yeah.
doing the work that we are doing.
And for myself, within the last year, well, I probably I think you got me onto white button mushrooms probably 2 years ago, something like that, and or maybe 18 months ago, or something, maybe 2 years. And this year, I've never had an estrogen test come back, even even in the top half of reference range, even when my testosterone was at the highest. On the testosterone, when my testosterone came back as at the highest on one of these tests, I was actually eating 400 grams of raw white button mushrooms a day in the preparation. Right, I would just sit in the car and I'd eat it like as a snack, just when I was driving home from work. 400 grams. I don't recommend that necessarily, but and some days I was eating like 800 grams of I was eating so much white button mushroom, and my testosterone to estrogen was 50-1, which is tough, but. I did have maybe a little bit of a tummy upset for sure.
800 grams of raw mushroom.
I know. I do not recommend that. I do not recommend that. But the the white button mushrooms you can prescribe to somebody with high estrogen, and I genuinely think that if anybody is suffering with high estrogen at the moment, if they tried white button mushrooms at 200 to 400 grams cooked per day, which sounds like a lot, but when you cook that, it cooks down to not very much, right?
Yeah.
And check it, and I'd be surprised if it doesn't make a considerable difference anyway.
Yeah. All right. There's so much more we can talk about that. Looking forward to those episodes. All right. Next one. What topics will the podcast not be afraid to challenge? And so, every time I have to think about stuff that I don't agree with, I always have a hard time coming up with stuff. But I think the biggest stuff is basically in the longevity sphere, where I'm not afraid to talk that fasting is not the way to go. You want to be more resilient, right? IGF-1 is actually not as bad as you think it is. Low carb is not the way to go. Yes, there's a lot of benefits to ketones and maybe cutting out carbs temporarily to improve your insulin sensitivity. But ultimately, carbs, they have a lot of benefits. And I want to talk about why carbs are good. And if people have carb problems, it's not because carbs are bad. It's because the specific carb that they are consuming is bad, or they have a gut issue, or there's an underlying issue. I want to talk a lot about,
or they have issues with insulin sensitivity or insulin secretion. There's so many reasons why somebody might have issues with carbohydrates, and none of it is because carbohydrates are bad.
Yeah, exactly. Even in the different kind of carbohydrates categories, different bananas versus dates, right, will give you different glucose insulin responses, differently change your HbA1c and fructosamine, change your lipids. Everything can affect you differently. So just saying carbs are bad is crazy talk.
100%. So exactly that. So I'm currently testing sorghum. You say sorghum? Sorghum.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting study. Sorghum muffins versus wheat muffins. Both are a refined flour, and the difference in blood sugar, postprandial blood sugar spikes after them, which was vast. It was massive difference, and they're flour, right? They're both a flour. So this is where different, as you say, even things that look very similar on paper, macro wise, texture, taste, they can have very different outcomes from a performance side of things, and also a response to those things as well. So it's really interesting to look at those and to be able to explain to people that there are these kind of nuances within everything that they eat.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will have new insights into a lot of things. And then the other thing I would definitely like to talk about is giving people clarity in terms of supplements, and this is a lot of what our experiments is basically doing as well. Is like, is this even worth buying or worth trying? What kind of study is this based on? What kind of wacky theory is this person coming up with? Or we touched on this a little bit, like peptide glorification, right? Everyone's like,
Yeah.
if I had to spend like $5,000, which peptide should I buy? It's like, hey, bro, maybe some food, and then
Yeah.
with
Well, yeah,
$5,000,
yeah.
right, you will have
Yeah,
food for
and
6 months.
yeah, with the peptide ones as well, there's so much on Instagram now where it's like, if you've got this problem, take this peptide. If you've got this problem, take this peptide. And it's like, it's a list of like 30 peptides. And someone like myself could look at that list. If you're a bit of a hypochondriac, you look at that list and go, I need 30 peptides. And you're going to take all, like, don't do that. And there is I think peptides, the reason I'm not getting into it is because I just think that it needs to have its peak, and then it needs to come back down to a sensible level where people talk about it in a sensible way. And I'm not going to be there for its like peak, and I'll be back when it's kind of come back to reality a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And all of the peptides are just grossly overpriced. Like for BPC capsules, it's like 150 to $200 per bottle. It's like, that's just bananas.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
All right, let's move on to the next
Yes.
one.
Well, just quickly for me on that section, there's a couple of bits. So some of the things that I think that we should, not being afraid to challenge. I think there is this kind of idea within the fitness industry, health industry, more in the fitness personal training space, that you kind of get what you're given in terms of your genetics and what you've got. Your testosterone declines by 1% every year or 2% every year. Like, these are the things we listen to all the time, and then people regurgitate that as fact. Yeah. So diet and supplements can't boost your testosterone. That is something that we can attack that head on. No worries. I'll have to dig out my testosterone test from in my early 20s when it was 600, and then when I'm 40 next year, and it's hovering 1,000, so it's 400 higher than it was, when I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And so that hasn't declined by 1% every year; it's gone up massively. So those kind of statements are thrown out there by fitness professionals, and so I think that one of the things we're not going to be afraid to do in this is challenge people. Call, like, not in a negative, like, neither you or I are going to be doing this in a negative way, but we can do it in an inquisitive way. In that sense. So if we see something and someone is stating something is fact and we don't necessarily agree with it, we can have a conversation with that person, or we can provide information around that topic where we can actually express maybe what our thoughts are on it and how that person might not be necessarily giving the full picture. So I think challenging people and challenging ideas is going to be everything for this. Challenging all these ideas, I think, is what this is going to be all about.
Yeah, data-driven clarity on how to save time and money.
Yeah.
And decades of wasted time.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Like, I wish I knew this stuff when I was messing around in my 20s, especially like, from the kind of confidence side of things, energy side of things, motivation side of things. I think I've spent a lot of my life in a relatively low energy state, tired, quite tired, not necessarily so outgoing, not particularly confident. And that's fixable. That's something you can do a huge amount to kind of sort out.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, people don't even know they have low energy, right? As I mentioned, they don't even know they have like gut issues until they start doing a specific protocol. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't even know, like, I had the problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, so there's 3 more segments. Let's see, you got to bounce in like 30 minutes, so let's see if we can knock them out quickly.
That's all good. We'll rattle through these. Enough. Yeah, I've got time, so it's all good. So who's the podcast for, right? So
yeah.
So I think that the podcast, this podcast is going to be fantastic for anybody that's interested in feeling better in any way. It's a broad starting point, but ultimately, I think, I specifically have more information, understanding of male hormone health and male performance, and you're the same hand. So I would say that this podcast is primarily, it is for men. That is the area that we have our greatest understanding. So it's men that want to optimize their health, their fitness, their energy, libido, training performance, and all of these things. And it's also for men that are maybe struggling with health issues in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. Maybe they've got some of these lipid issues. Maybe they've got some of the blood sugar issues. They've got low testosterone and things like that. It's definitely for people that are considering TRT and want maybe a good balance of advice on that. And I think we're probably as good as anybody to give that, as with being on both sides of that fence essentially.
Yeah.
And then people that have maybe been on certain medications for years, or been down that medical route, and then come off of it and then maybe struggling with symptoms. So I know with you, Hans, for example, you worked with a lot of people for things like post-finasteride syndrome, which is very common. So many people pushing finasteride heavily on my Instagram feed, which is scary. I don't know why they're doing it either. It's not like they're making money from like Pfizer or whoever makes finasteride, right? Yeah. They're not getting paid. Well, maybe they are, but there's so many people pushing these things, and again, people having similar problems from SSRI withdrawal, mitochondria dysfunction after SSRI withdrawal, and also hormone, energy, libido problems with SSRI withdrawal as well. So I think that, I know that you've covered a lot about the post-finasteride syndrome, but, again, just tapping into those people and being here to provide information and reassurance to those people as well.
Yeah, I think for me, like the biggest things that I want to give to people is, with all of this experience that we have gained, with all of this experimentation and struggling ourselves to find what really works, is for people to save time, to save money, and just get clarity on what to do. And ultimately, it's just a time saver. Like if you could, this is why, what would I do if I had to start over, right? It's going to save you so much time. Yeah. You should actually know what works. But the other things what do we say?
Yeah, so I think that is so important and useful. Is, for example, at the moment, I'm going to have the results for this for the next podcast. But I've been testing one food essentially for lowering cholesterol, not a supplement, not a herb, not a peptide, not a compound, a food, and the results so far have been pretty amazing within just a few days. And I'm going to do some proper testing next week. As we said before, my cholesterol sits between 300 and 500 for the most part. This morning it was like 240. These are only I test it on a regular basis, just total lipids, just because obviously I want to test it frequently. I've got a blood test on Tuesday, but if that could, there's a prime example of what a shortcut that would be for people.
Yeah.
Rather than years of medication, years of supplements, and years of trial and error, make this one meal every day and your cholesterol is going to, it's just, that's the information I think is going to be amazing for this.
Yeah, I love that, because when people think about lowering cholesterol naturally, it's like, okay, which 5 to 10 supplements should I be taking? Because this is what I also don't like about natural supplements, right? Or in most cases, they are so ineffective, and people love to overblow certain supplements. It's like, this thing is amazing for lowering your HSCRP. This is NAC, for example, right? It's a study on NAC. And then it's like, when you look at the actual data, over 12 weeks, HSCRP went from 5.5 to 4.9. It's like, dude, what the hell? That was like, yeah. It's not good.
Yeah, that could be there's so many other variables that could be. If they did the test at a slightly different time of day, you'd probably get more of a profound result than from that alone.
Yeah.
One of the really interesting things I'm going to be testing over the next couple of weeks, because I've got access to DHT testing, is the creatine on the creatine impacts on DHT. Yeah. And I love the most recent study on creatine and hair loss. There was one that came out recently. It's on PubMed. Does creatine cause hair loss? And the markers are all over the place, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't shed any light on anything because it's Data's bonkers. The placebo group, their testosterone went from just over 250 to over 500.
Yeah,
That's the placebo group.
yeah, yeah.
Why is that data even on my computer screen? Like, honestly, if a placebo is a doubling their testosterone, man, like you don't want to see variation in the placebo. Not to that level.
Yeah.
So but anyway, like that's an example. It's an example, right? I don't even know where I got that from, but it's where if we actually do some testing on this, we can actually see and show the actual outcome. So like that's where but creatine is something I'm going to be testing for its effects on DHT. So I'm going to probably do like 30 grams of creatine a day for a week, and then test. There was the rugby player study. I think they did 25, 30 or something around that. They saw a hefty increase in DHT. So I'm probably going to do a 30 grams of creatine a day for DHT in the next couple of weeks. So.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But bringing back to your experiment on cholesterol, this is also why I like food
Yeah.
and why I brought up the neck, right? So you're finding that the experiment's actually working really, really well. Versus if you were to use something like red yeast, red rice yeast, something like that, you would see a minuscule drop. But with the food, you're seeing a huge drop. With a neck, they saw a puny drop in HSCRP. When I was doing white button mushroom, my HSCRP, because I was doing a gut protocol, was elevated at that time due to die-off. My HSCRP was like 5. After the mushroom, 2 weeks later, it was like 0.6. Right, that is significant changes, and that's why I like food.
100%, and like you say, so for like some of the things I've experimented up until this point have been things like saffron and tudka and like herbs and things like that. Saffron's got there's good data on saffron, in humans reducing cholesterol. But let's say it reduces it by 10%, okay, which is statistically significant.
Yeah.
But for me, if I go from 500 to 450, I'm not excited by that. I'm still the U curve for cholesterol. I'm still I'm up there on that U. And so it's absolutely right. Whereas, some of the things I'm testing at the moment in animal studies, 68% reduction in LDL from food.
Yeah.
25% reduction in fasting blood glucose from a food, not from a supplement. So it's it's where it's going to get really interesting where we can do these tests.
Yeah. All right. So let me just finish off my list real quick, and then we can move on to the next one. So this is also for people that is not looking for a magic pill. They want to understand their own bodies. They want a simpler approach. They want to understand. They want to master their own bodies so to become their own coach ultimately, because you resonate this symptom with, I need to do this root cause, right? So at the end of the day, you become so educated that you don't need to rely on anything except the foundational diet and lifestyle that you've created. And then if anything arises, like you suddenly have gut issues, or your sleep was really bad, or your stress was off for some reason, now you have the tools to situationally use them, not chronically. And I'm not against experimentation, of course not, or supplements. It gives you interesting data, but the baseline shouldn't be to try to use everything and see if it works. It should be out of an interest, curiosity. Is like, what is this going to do for this specific outcome? And then also, this podcast is not for people that wants to use a million supplements. We want to use as little as possible. We want to keep the foundation, the protocol as simple as possible, so we can actually focus on our lives, right? Not being a hypochondriac, using 100 stuff, not doing a 20-step night routine just to maximize your sleep quality. Like sometimes you want to watch something at night. Sometimes there's going to be blue light available. What can I do so that my sleep is still amazing despite like all of those not being ideal according to the biohackers? This is what we're optimizing for in this podcast.
It's funny you mentioned that, because sleep for me is something that I was having some struggles with just a couple of months ago. And, my deep sleep, my REM sleep was bad. My heart rate variability was not good, and all of these things. And I'm now on. I don't take any supplements like at all. I was taking like Apogene, and I was taking magnesium. I was taking maybe 4 or 5 things to try and help support sleep. And I don't take any tablets before bed now. But what I do have is like some kind of something that's going to help with kind of binding endotoxin, for example. So it doesn't matter. What's the one that we've been using lately? The
Terror's gel.
yeah, Enteris gel. It could be that. It could be charcoal. It could be modified citrus pectin. It probably could be just citrus pectin. It probably doesn't matter. But if I just have some of that later on in the evening, my sleep is much better. And it's just gut inflammation. That I'm not waking up like in the morning kind of tired or groggy or startled or anything like that. And so I'm now on a zero supplement before bed routine for the first time in 10 years probably.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So that is the goal for everyone listening. All right, let's move on to the second last one. What does success look like for the listener, you guys, in 6 to 12 months from now? So I've already mentioned this. I want you to become so aware of your body that you know, like, this happened, I'm going to do this. And you have the tools available to fix that, right? So it's not obsessing over the smallest detail all the time. You have great stable energy all the time. So you've basically solved your health by focusing on the root cause, right? The protocols that you're doing is root cause specific. So you're doing so that you're not doing so many things all at once. You're just focusing on the root cause. So simplicity is the key. You have clarity. You've created a foundation. You've gotten results because you're focused on the root causes, and you're not doing a comprehensive biohacking routine just to function like a normal individual and injecting 10 peptides because like everyone is saying so.
Yeah, 100%. I think with that one is definitely, definitely freeing themselves from all of the different supplements, all of the different protocols that they've been stuck on. I think so many people are doing too much. They're doing too much and not focusing on the essentials, which are maybe going to be a little bit more, they're going to support those results that much more,
Yeah. Yep. All right. Last one. So why does this podcast need to exist right now? What do you have?
So basically for the main reasons is to have real data on so much of this stuff, and transparency around that data. So, nobody is doing their homework on anything they're recommending or anything they're promoting, really. I think the only people really doing comprehensive testing are like maybe the advanced bodybuilder world, because they have to, because they're at high risk. There's not many people doing this level of testing or any testing at all for optimization. Even people that are pushing products, promoting products, they'll say, buy this, it increases your DHT. But they're going off of one anecdotal study on PubMeds, right? There's rather than actually distributing it amongst 5 of their friends and testing it. Like there's no testing. And it's just blind following of any study that people can find online. Bearing in mind, for every positive study, you can also find a negative study for nearly anything. It doesn't mean that data is accurate or correct. It just means in that moment, in that circumstance, that thing happened. There's other variables and things. So I think the kind of real case studies around what's going to move the needle, what's going to actually be effective, and then transparency around that. And then also, I really think that there is still a deterioration of people. There's a big deterioration of people's health still, right? People are taking more drugs. They're being supported more by medicine than they ever have been in history. But health is still is overall, there's still a lot of health concerns. Low testosterone, obviously. We're constantly now told about the generational decline in testosterone, which I do believe, and I'm sure that the data on that is accurate. There's so much in the environment that's damaging our health.
Yeah.
But you can offset so much of this. We can offset so much of this with our diet, with our nutrition, and by looking after ourselves in a sensible way. And so I think this podcast needs to exist right now because there are so many things coming at us, so many areas of our lives which are going to be causing us problems that we need to address and focus on so that we can optimize our health and live as we should.
Yeah. There has always been, since the internet started, more blogs, more people talking. There's always been an information overload, but now with AI, everyone is like creating so much AI slop. And it's even more information overload. Nobody knows what to do. And I think like this personal touch where we are doing these experiments is even more helpful than ever to give clarity to what actually works or not. Like interpreting the studies with, like, I'm not against in vitro studies, right? The white button mushroom study was in vitro. It showed low estrogen. I was like, okay, I'm going to test that because there's no human data on it. And boom, it actually works. It confirmed the study. And this is why you test. But you can't just look at a study like royal jelly increasing like your facial bone growth and think it's better than milk. Like, come on, son. So like you have to be testing stuff and thinking critically. So information overload is what I want to help people with. It's again like saving time, having clarity, implementing the most effective things you can actually enjoy and live your life. That's it, right? You don't have to consume all of the information. You don't have to buy all of the supplements. It's about really educating on what's the most effective so you can live your life to the fullest.
Yeah, I think the the AI stuff. I did, we haven't even talked about that, but that's actually one of the scariest things out there at the moment. Is like the amount of the amount of data, like stuff that thing pulls out, that you're just like, what are you talking? Like, ChatGPT gets its health information from like Reddit in 2006. It's like getting its health information from sub-blogs on on crazy people's blogs, right? It's just bonkers.
Yeah.
It doesn't it doesn't know anything. And so it's really quite dangerous at the moment for people's health, I would say.
Yeah.
If they're following it blindly.
Yeah, it's like you should. Yes, go ahead.
I do use it because it's useful if you have data that you want to interpret and summarize concisely. It's really useful. If you ask it something, it doesn't. It searches the internet. It searches Google for whatever it can find on that topic, and then it looks at what's most suitable. It's just a search engine right now, right? It is just a search engine, a clever one that can articulate.
Yeah.
And so the information it gives us is really problematic, and some people rely on it for they're like, I wrote a food plan for myself with ChatGPT, and it's like it can't even calculate macros.
Yeah.
I had to post this thing somewhere, but it was like I was getting it to calculate macros, and it's like it couldn't do like the multiplications of protein, fats, and carbs, and it blew my mind, and I was like, okay. Let's maybe turn that off for a little while when we're trying to do these things,
Yeah, exactly. It's a very, very useful tool, but at the end of the day, you still have to be the curator, because you're still
you have to give it what you need. You have to provide it with the useful information so that it can interpret it, or make it understandable and readable for other, for people, that kind of thing. But if you just ask like, hey man, what are the best 5 supplements for testosterone boosting? It's going to boron, Tomcat Ali. It's just going to drag the ones down that it finds on Google.
Yeah, like I hate those posts, man. Like when it goes viral on X, it's like, here's the 10 supplements you should use for testosterone, like pumpkin seed for zinc. It's like, and then the post just goes banana viral. So it's like, oh my gosh.
I know. I saw one the other day, and this guy, he posted like, here are the only 6 or 7 supplements that have got evidence from clinical trials or for trials in humans for boosting testosterone. And it was like boron and blah 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 and all these things. And I'm like, well, there's way more than like there's so many that if you actually look a little, if you go past the first page on Google, you'll find a lot more.
Yeah.
And I wanted to I didn't get into it. I didn't share it with him, but like there's studies on myoinositol boosting testosterone a lot in men. D-chiroinositol. Like there's stacks of these things. If you just search a little, if you search further than TikTok, then you're going to find more information. And I'm not saying that these things are going to necessarily work for you, but there is data out there for it. There's loads.
Yeah. All right, dude. I'm very, very excited for what's to come. So I think that's good for the first episode. The next episode, guys, we're going to talk a lot about more of our philosophies, the experiments that we're doing, the results that we're getting, and then useful compounds that you can take for certain scenarios just to supercharge your life. So this is going to be, in my opinion, I'm extremely excited about this. I've been doing health optimization for over 10 years now. You've been doing it for a very long time. And I feel like 2 guys with the same philosophies and the same experiments and the same mindsets coming together and like really talk about this, taking it to the next level. This is where I feel like, this is why I actually stopped with natural testosterone optimization, because I felt like I read all of the studies, I tried everything. There was nothing new. And now you're coming along and you're actually testing all of this. And like, this is the new frontier to
Yeah.
testosterone optimization in humans, like actual human testing
Yeah.
this to see what works.
Absolutely. And I think one thing that would be really exciting for people to sort of think about is things that we've got on the horizon for testing as well. So things that we're maybe got in the works at the moment or maybe coming up in the future. Um, I mean, I know you're running some tests at the moment, right? And I am too. I think we'll talk more about the tests we're running currently on the next one, probably, because we'll probably have some results for that. At the moment, I'm running some tests for, obviously, for cholesterol lowering, but within this test as well, I am going to also probably get some interesting information on testosterone and DHT as well, because the food source I'm testing currently for cholesterol has been shown in some vague studies, I think, to increase DHT and testosterone and to lower prolactin as well, possibly. I'll have to find that. But so that's the food I'm testing at the moment. A couple of things on the horizon for me. Fermented herbs. So Hans shared this thing maybe 6 months ago or whenever about Vince Goronda's fermented ginger ale. He used to mix it with double cream or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The
yeah.
guy, like, which sounds crazy, but at that point, I did a little bit of digging into fermented herbs, fermented herbs and fermented anything actually. So the food I'm testing at the moment, one of the studies on it was actually a fermented version of that food, which showed a 68% reduction in cholesterol in mice. The non-fermented, I think, showed 50%. I'm currently testing the non-fermented version, but that gives you an idea of how powerful the fermentation process is. Likewise, for the fermented herbs I'm going to be testing, to give you an example of one of them, one of the herbs that I'm going to be testing is a fermented bitter melon. And in animal studies, it showed a 55% increase in testosterone, which was higher than the non-fermented still got, decent results, and the fermented even better. And there's no good studies on bitter melon in humans. There's nothing of any interest or any value. So that I'll be the first human to ever test fermented bitter melon for testosterone. So that's going to be fun.
That's dope. So for me, all of the things that I'm currently testing is I don't always need it. I just like to collect data, and I think this is also a good point where, for someone that doesn't need it, does it actually have a stimulatory effect or just a balancing effect? And this is where you will see like a study showing it helps with the people. Let's say someone's hypothyroid. So this helps them to restore thyroid function, but does it actually stimulate thyroid function? So I'm testing things for thyroid, my adrenals, like DHA, to see how things are affecting my prolactin, my SSBG. I unfortunately can't test DHT. That's why David is going to be doing that here. I can't do it in South Africa. I'm testing my growth hormone, IGF-1. I'm doing frequent stool tests. I'm going to do my genetic test soon. So I'm just like testing categories in it. And this whole 2025, I've been testing a lot of aromatase inhibiting compounds. Not that I need
Yeah.
it, but just to see like which is actually effective. Because like when you look at the research, there's not a lot of human evidence on any of this. And so I'm kind of like testing to see like what actually works in humans and what doesn't. So that's kind of like how I go about it. And
Yeah, it
for
it
us,
was it was the same with the cholesterol side as well, Hans. Like there's actually loads of really interesting animal studies and animal data on certain things, and not much human information. And then I'm like, man, what am I going to test? Like there's 10 things I want to test. Which, like, what do I test? The phospholipids, right? The phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine. Like there's studies on that for cholesterol, like massive drops, and also reduced plaque buildup as well. And then in animal studies, and then there's like Shilajit, which has really good data on it too in animal studies. Then there's saffron, which has got great data. Chrysin, which I know has got poor absorption, but like maybe if you fermented it, I don't know. Like, there's all of these things that I want to test for that. So it's really exciting, and it's also frustrating that I haven't got more time to test more things.
yeah, time is running out. Use everything all at
I know.
once.
Yeah. Well, that was my previous mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know it's frustrating. Anyway, all right, before we talk too much, thank you guys for listening, and be sure to check in the next episode. It's going to be fun. All right, see you guys in the next one.